Good morning, good morning. Let's see here, guys. I'm working with some technical problems right now. For your patience. Alright, so let me fix this. Let's see here. Got 5 people in here with me. Good morning to the 5 of you who are here. I'm almost ready. I'm just waiting on a driver to install here. Should be any minute and we'll get going. In the meantime, I can answer any kind of questions that you may have in chat for me right now. Like, we got a new exam this week. Maybe you got questions about that. Maybe you got questions about your paper grades, which I'm almost finished with. I'm on the Seymour class, and they're my last class. I got Northview and Seward County papers finished. Just working on Seymour now. Alright. Get this to work. Again, sorry guys, just working through a little snafu with my broadcasting software. Decided not to want to work with my webcam this morning. And I've been fighting it for the last 10-15 minutes, but I was hoping to get it rolling here for you guys. I think I'll be able to get us rolling in just a few minutes here. No worries. And then we could talk health psychology and stress. How relevant, since I'm stressed right now at this very moment. But yeah, let's see here. That looks good. Looks good. That's working. 7 people. A couple more people join me. Good morning. Good morning. Just working through some tech problems real quick. Thanks for hanging with me for a second. We'll get it knocked out. Okay, that's looking better. We're making progress here, guys. We're making progress. It's looking better. Looking better. Let's see. Seven people still. All right. Getting closer. Getting closer. I can feel it. It's getting there. All right. See if this works. How are you guys making it in quarantine? Throw me some chat. What have you been doing to survive? What have you been doing to maintain your sanity? Hopefully you've all been staying inside, or at least socially distancing. You have to stay inside. It's been beautiful the last week or so, which makes it really hard to stay inside. Hey, sleep, huh, Slima? Sleep? Yeah, it is kind of nice to sleep in. Not gonna lie, like that part's been really nice. Although I don't know, I feel like I'm working harder than ever. I got up this morning at 6, and I've been going ever since, trying to get ready for this and student advising. Stuff's been crazy. Oh, cool, Tiffany. That's a really good idea. Sit outside because it's so beautiful outside, right? So definitely sit outside and get some fresh air. Smell the flowers. Look at all the green grass, and the trees are starting to bloom. Yeah, it's a nice time of the year to be outside. All right, I think I have it working. Oh my word! Here we go. Last moment of truth to test here, and here we go. Fingers crossed. Okay, I'm still waiting. That means it's bad. Okay, now I think we're ready to roll. Okay, cool. Uh, Close this junk out. You don't need to see all this stuff I have open. This would just clutter the screen big time. Close, close. Man, I had a lot of stuff open. Trying to fix this problem. 7 people still hanging with me. Cool. Alright, close this. Wow, it's working a lot better. This is cool. Alright, let me just look right here. Where are you? Yeah, alright, cool. Cool, we're back. Starting it up. Fire up the screen. Here is, hopefully this will be gone. This will be gone. I need to hide this, and I need to hide this, and I need to hide this, and then you get the weird screen. All right, cool. I think we're back. Man, that light's really bright. All right, let's try this. There. Good. It's been rough. I got surgery on my ears. Oh no. Tiffany, so I'm glad that you got your surgery, but I know that how did that go? I'm sure they only would allow like certain people around the facility. I have a friend right now, a former colleague who teaches history for PSYC, who unfortunately is having some heart problems, and he's going in for a procedure today, and they won't allow his family to be around because of COVID-19. So hopefully your procedure went well and you had some family to support you there, and I hope so, at least. All right, so let's talk about this week. This week's going to be a bit different than last week. You do have a test coming up this week, and the reason that that's going to happen is because next week on the 13th, Monday, that was supposed to be all of your. Oh, good, cool. I'm glad you were able to do it without anesthesia and your parents, Tiffany. That's great. Next week is supposed to be your spring break, right, guys? That was no. Let me amend that statement. Next week was supposed to be our spring break, where we got to enjoy our time off. Remember, because I didn't get a spring break with a college because I was with you guys, and Well, we didn't get that opportunity because now we're in quarantine. But I do still accept that maybe people had plans, and the Sevier County school system sent out a message last week to us saying, hey, you may not want to assign stuff this week because this is supposed to be their spring break. So, for that reason, next week there will be no tasks. There will be no quizzes due. There will be no lectures. There will be no reading. Nothing to do for you guys. But the bad news is I was planning to give a test next week. So I had to kind of back that test up to start today. So let's go to the course, and I can go to any of the courses. Again, they all look the same. I'll go here to the Northview section, but they all look exactly the same. On the Northview section, I'm seeing here I got a new course news announcement for you guys, talking about this week and what we're working on. And then you'll see some new evaluation points up on the right. April 12th, you have exam 3 due. And April 12th, you have a discussion board due. But notice there's not a reading quiz due until after you come back from spring break. So, let's go to the course module. Take a look there. Course information, course content. Get a sip of coffee. And what we see here is a new module at the very bottom, April 6th module, April 6th through 12th, health psychology. So I got a PowerPoint here. I'm going to go ahead and download that. We're going to use that kind of as a reference this morning to talk for a few minutes. It's a pretty cool PowerPoint. This is a great chapter. Then you have a link here for those of you who don't make it to the live stream. You should be able to watch this on a vlog. I had one student email me from Northview, by the way, say they couldn't access the YouTube channel on their Chromebook. I see Tiffany. I see Salima. So I'm just curious for those two ladies. I know they're both in the Northview section. You haven't had trouble with your Chromebook, right? Accessing this? You've had no difficulty, I'm assuming? You've been here through the live streams. Have you guys gone to the channel and watched like a YouTube video after the fact? Did you have trouble? Let me know as I kind of go through this. Anyways, so there's that, if you missed the live stream. Then there's a stress documentary. It's about an hour long, but it's so good, guys. You guys are going to love, 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 love this documentary. Profiles one of my favorite psychologists. His name is Robert Sapolsky. He's a Stanford psychoimmunologist. Oh, really, Austin? Okay. That's weird. That's so weird. Okay. That's weird. Okay, well, I'll suggest maybe to use the phone. Don't get why it would be blocked. Except, well, I have an idea. I think I know why it might be blocked. Is that for us to have chat enabled, I have to mark the stream as for adults. If I make it for kids, no one can type in the chat, and I can't interact with you guys. So that kind of defeats the purpose of the live stream. But I will look at the published files and see if I can maybe alter that. Okay, thanks. Thanks, guys. All right, appreciate the feedback. So, yeah, definitely watch this video over Robert Sapolsky's research with baboons, and amazing. Like, he studied the stress response in baboons from a biological perspective, looking at glucocorticoids, and that's a big term for things like epinephrine, norepinephrine. You might remember this from the brain chapter, the endocrine system. He looked at things like cortisol levels as they correlated with things like heart disease, cancer, lots of other negative health outcomes. Just an amazing documentary, so you definitely want to watch that. And then there's a discussion board where I ask you to talk about something in your life where you've demonstrated avoidance conflict. We'll talk about that in a second. And then to tell me about something you thought was interesting from the film. And then there is going to be tomorrow. This is big news. I hope everyone will attend. I will have the Kahoot live stream review. And I know a bunch of you hit that before because I had like 40 or 50 people in that stream. It was a big time stream. So it'll be the same thing. It'll help prepare you for the next exam. And this exam is no different than exam 2. 50 questions, 40 minutes. It's like a big reading quiz except for two things, right? It's timed and you get one shot. So it will be just like exam 2. It shouldn't be that difficult over chapters 7, 8, 9, 10. That's cognition, lifespan development, motivation and emotion, and sexuality, which we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. Cool. All right. With that being said, let's go to downloads and let's talk a bit about health psychology for the rest of our time together today. And I'm going to have my textbook open here to chapter 11. Chapter 11 is kind of short, actually, compared to the other chapters. And there's a couple reasons for that. Reason one, health psychology is a relatively new field compared to some of the other subfields we've talked about so far. Cognitive psychology, developmental psychology. These are old fields. They've been around a long time. But studying the stress response has been something that's relatively new, and it's kind of paralleled biology because our endocrine system, our immune system, they're so tightly joined at the hip with our psychology, and especially when it comes to stress. So let's start with just kind of defining the field and some key questions. So one of the big questions I want you to think about as you read throughout this entire chapter is this really foundational question. Are you in control, emphasize that word control, of your health and well-being? Because a lot of us give that control up, actually, to people outside of ourselves. We give that control up to, let's see if you remember this from the previous chapter, we overly rely on extrinsic motivating factors, money, title, fame, success, all that kind of stuff. And if we constantly are externally motivated by that, well, then who are we giving the control to? We're giving the control to people outside of ourselves. And those people can use that control to do a lot of things, like stress you out, like compromise your health. And that's what this field is all about. Health psychology is the study of behavioral principles to prevent illness and disease. And it's sad that we are having this live stream under quarantine. But at the same time, what a kind of beautiful moment to examine this. Behavioral principles means that you have control over your behavior, what you choose to do. Right now, we are being asked to prevent the spread of COVID-19, the disease. We're being asked to self-quarantine. We're being asked to modify our behaviors to socially distance. We're being asked to wash our hands more often. We're being asked to demonstrate a lot of behaviors that a lot of us, it's uncommon. We're not conditioned to demonstrate those behaviors. Stay inside. And I really feel for all of you. I really do. I was having this conversation with my brother yesterday about this. I was talking about you guys. And I was saying to him that on one hand, I feel for you, but on the other hand, I'm jealous of you. Because if this had happened to me when I was your age, I would have gone crazy. I didn't have social media. I didn't have smartphones. I had a telephone that I shared with my parents. But I didn't have the same connectivity. I didn't have Xboxes and PlayStations and online games. I'm rocking some World of Warcraft here today. I didn't have a lot of these online games to stay in touch with my friends. And it would have been socially debilitating. You guys, I'm a bit jealous because you do have these tools to reach out. But you are still having to make behavioral choices about things like congregating with your friends. And not everyone's doing it, right? I see these news stories where groups of young people are getting together, groups of churches are getting together, and man, what a horrible chance to spread this disease. So an interesting moment in history, right, for us to be talking about this chapter. Another key aspect of health psychology is not just the behavioral choices we make, but what about the consequence of those choices to our body, specifically to the immune system of our body, and how our choices impact our immune system. And believe it or not, it does impact our immune system in significant ways. So a big kind of goal of this chapter is about you changing the paradigm. What I mean by paradigm is the model of the way you think about the way you control your behavior and how that impacts your health and well-being. And part of that paradigm shift or model change is you becoming much more aware of your thoughts and your own self-control and awareness. And there's a study by Spiegel looking at like just the power, and it was looking at a particular area of behavior change and disease control amongst people, and it was amazing using like not propaganda, but using mass media to try to get people to stop smoking. The profound change it had when people had self-awareness and control about their health outcomes. So pretty amazing study. If you get a chance to look at it, I think I have it cited in the textbook or in this presentation. You can go read it. So there's some risk factors that we need to think about when it comes to the kind of behaviors that we demonstrate. And I'm going to show them to you on the next screen, and they're going to be dated a bit, but I want you to think about, as you look at these risk factors, what kind of personality type lends itself to being more affected by these risk factors. And we haven't talked about personality yet. We will after you come back from spring break a little bit. But there are certain personality types associated with poor health. In this chapter, we'll talk a little bit about type A versus type B versus type C personality types. And you're going to see that certain personality types are more predisposed to have problems with this. Look at this data for a second. I want you to give me some. I just broke the computer. Hold on. I forgot I can't do that. Let me try to magnify this a little bit for you guys. Yeah, that's better. These are this is dated. This is data gathered, I think in 2000 actually. So it's a bit old. I need to get a new chart. I need to find a new study. But they typically do this every 10 years. I just need to update it to the 2010 or maybe the 2020 of the next coming year. But these are the leading causes of death in the U.S. By risk factor of and I want to emphasize something: preventable death. Preventable death. Does that any of those shock you guys as you look? And by the way, I'm fairly certain when the 2020 census comes out, tobacco would have been replaced as the number one cause of death, preventable death, by diet and activity. I'm fairly certain that today more people die as a result of coronary heart disease, diabetes, complications with those diseases because of lack of control in their diet and a lack of inactivity in their life. But if you think about all of these things, whether you smoke, whether you don't eat properly, or you don't exercise enough, or you drink too much alcohol, or you demonstrate, let's say, behaviors that get you more exposed to infection, like now, right? Like right now, people going out and congregating in groups, not a great idea. Like you do that, you're more prone to develop COVID-19, and unfortunately, you're more likely to die as a result of complications with the virus. Toxic agents. Many people expose themselves to toxic agents and drugs. I know drugs are a little later there, but they expose themselves to these things and more likely to die as a result of it. Watch any TV show in the middle of the day today that talks about, or that shows like old westerns. And like every other commercial's commercial for a lawyer asking, do you need help suing for mesothelioma, a form of cancer? Because a lot of people in the 50s and 60s worked in shipyards around asbestos, and asbestos we know is a toxic agent that leads to cancer, mesothelioma. Motor vehicles, think about the kind of behaviors people demonstrate in the way they drive, right? Like when I leave high school parking lots, I'm looking at you, Northview, looking at you, Seymour, looking at you, Sevier County. Or when I arrive at parking lots in the morning, the kind of behavior I see demonstrated by teenage drivers worries me from time to time. Firearms, the use of firearms, and the irresponsible use of firearms. Lost a friend as a result of this, twirling a pistol when he was 22. Twirled a pistol, had a round in it, shot himself in the head, killed him. That kind of behavior. Sexual behavior, not having protected sex, having unprotected sex, and engaging in sexually risky behavior, and then illicit use of drugs. All of these can be prevented by behaviors and decisions that you make, is my point. All right, let's talk about stress and stressors. This is a big part of your textbook. Your textbook talks about catastrophes, and see if this doesn't sound relevant to what we're all going through now. I'm going to read the definition from the book. Catastrophe is an unpredictable, large-scale event that creates tremendous need to adapt and adjust, as well as overwhelming feelings of threat. We are in a catastrophe now, right? And that catastrophe is fueling lots of stress towards us. In particular, it is the stressor. It's here. It's the condition that's creating this threat to us, this COVID-19, this condition, this spreading virus that's moving throughout our country. That's causing a lot of physiological reaction in our autonomic nervous system. Largely, lots of release of glucocorticoids, like I mentioned from Robert Sapolsky's research. Largely a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is being released through people's bloodstreams by the endocrine system, and that cortisol is causing your blood pressure to be higher, your heart rate to be faster, your digestive system to not work as well. It's causing your immune system to be depressed. It's causing your even ovulation in women. There are studies to show that women are less likely to conceive during this time if they have higher levels of cortisol running through their bloodstream. So stress is not this intangible, magical thing out there that doesn't exist and manifests itself in your body physically. It does. Stress is not this just thing that you can't see, taste, touch, smell. It may feel that way to you, but from your body standpoint, it very much is a physiological process. It's a response to these stressors that are going on. Now, not all stress is bad, by the way. I like to put all of you under stress, and I like to cause a bit of arousal and a bit of anxiety with you. But it's not distress. Distress is that kind of negative, tough, bad stress. But eustress here is when we have a challenge. I don't know, like a test. Some of you have stress about tests, right? Some of you, a few minutes ago, you're like, oh, really, Terry? You're going to give us an exam this week? I got to study for this thing. I have to make notes. I have to get ready for all this. Yeah, you do. And the reason I'm creating that is it's a challenge. You should be challenged, right? But not all the time. It shouldn't be chronic. I don't give you tests every day. And there's a reason for that, because it just wouldn't be prolonged stress. Even eustress in certain situations, if it's chronic, it's bad. Like, me give you guys an example. Do you guys like going to Dollywood? I miss Dollywood right now, but do you like going to Dollywood and riding roller coasters? I do. It's fun. I love the Wild Eagle. It's my favorite roller coaster at Dollywood. A few years ago, we went to Dollywood late in the afternoon. A thunderstorm broke out. It was like around 2 or 3 o'clock. Lightning was going everywhere. And, of course, everyone's fleeing the park, heading for the parking lot. And I said to my son, it's just my son and I, I'm like, hey, let's go over and get something to eat and see if the storm will pass. So we went over and got some food. And we sat there at the restaurant. And sure enough, like any like many thunderstorms in the summer in East Tennessee, it kind of cleared quick and moved on. And the park was empty. Like, there was nobody there. It was just bare. So we went over to the Wild Eagle, and there was nobody in line. I'm talking, we walked up the stairs. We literally walked up to the turnstiles, and there might be one person there. If not, we could walk up, and if we didn't pick the front or back car, there was always an open spot. So we got on the Wild Eagle, we rode it. We walked back down. We didn't even walk all the way to the bottom. We kind of cheesed the line and jumped over the line halfway down, walked back up, rode it again. We did this 24 times. We rode the Wild Eagle 24 straight times. The first 8, 9 times, 10 times, it was good. It was good stress. It was eustress. It was like, it's kind of challenging to go up that high and drop and go through the trees, and your arousal levels, your cortisol levels are up because you're a little stressed because it's kind of fun and challenging. But after the 10th, 11th, 12th, I remember my son's like, let's go for 15, let's go for 16, let's go for 20. And I was literally getting nauseous. My body was trying to adapt to so much stress. It was just not a good prolonged event. Even eustress over long periods of time is not something that's really great for us. Pressure's kind of self-described. So let's talk about the process of how we deal with stress. First thing we typically do is we make appraisals. And when I say appraisal, this is a cognitive thing, right, guys? So what if I said to all of you, exam 3, it's going to be hard. It's going to be so hard, I'm convinced half of you will fail. When you hear me say that, some of you, well, all of you are going to make a primary appraisal. Here's what you're going to say. Is he talking about me? Is that relevant to me? Now, some of you are going to go, are you kidding? I made an A on the last test. I made an A on the first test. I've been doing great in this class. Clearly, he's not talking to me. And therefore, it's not a relevant threat. You just move on. There's no stress response, right? But some of you make a secondary appraisal and you're like, oh, I think he's talking about me. And then you start thinking, well, okay, how do I deal with this stressor? I think I'm going to fail. I need to get some review material. I need to reread the textbook. I need to attend the Kahoot live stream. I need to review. I'm gonna get some resources together, try to mitigate the stress I'm feeling as a result of Terry's really horrible statement that he made to all of us. And if you mitigate effectively, then you lower the stress response. So we all go through these primary and secondary appraisals whenever stressors come in, and it helps us kind of deal with the stress, helps us mitigate it. If it's prolonged, right? If you can't mitigate it enough, and it happens over long periods of time, you may experience just exhaustion as a result of prolonged exposure to stress. So a lot of people will say things like this, they'll say like, I'm just kind of used up. I'm completely apathetic. I don't care about being here. I don't care about being at work. I don't care if I get fired. A lot of people have that kind of emotional exhaustion. A lot of times they're very cynical. They're negative and pessimistic about everything, and they're always complaining. They're always bitter. They're the kind of people that you really don't want to be around at work. They kind of rub off on you when they're overly stressed like this. I would say to you guys, we've talked about this before. We talked about this in the motivation chapter. We're going to talk about it in the personality chapter after you come back from spring break. Are you certain that your career choice and field, what you're going to major in college, what you're going to do for the rest of your life, aligns with intrinsic motivation and your personality type? If you can align those things, you will have less likelihood of stress and burnout in your career. Let me give you a good example. My personality type is extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and open to experience. That's part of the Myers-Briggs and part of the Big 5 personality inventory, which you guys are going to take one of those inventories for me when you come back from spring break. If you look at the research data of that personality type, guess what it aligns with? Helping fields, teaching, counseling, therapy. It aligns really well with that. My motivation, my intrinsic motivation, which I've already talked to you guys about in the previous chapter, is I love I get a lot of reward out of being around young people and helping them achieve goals. Not because I get paid money to do it, because it gives me a personal sense of satisfaction. So I don't experience a lot of stress with my job, even now when it's crazy. Even now when, our classroom's flipped out of proportion, everyone's stressed out because of the virus. Even now, I get a lot of satisfaction out of, I appreciate you guys coming to the chat. Appreciate you coming to the live streams. I don't feel stress and burnout in my job. If you were to put me, however, in my previous career field, which was computer science programmer, you put an extroverted person in a cubicle and have them code all day, like I used to do, not great. I get burned out in that setting because I can't connect with people. And so I figured out early on in my career that that's not going to be what I wanted to do. What you guys have to figure out is what career field best aligns with your motivational factors and your personality type, so you don't experience the stress and burnout. We talked about primary and secondary appraisals earlier in the graph, so I don't feel like I need to talk too much more about that. But I do want to mention this third bullet point here. When you think about the way you deal with stressors and you make appraisals, there is the sense that people at times feel like they have a perceived, I want to emphasize that word, a perceived lack of control. And that's actually, I would argue, more threatening than an actual lack of control. Now, what we're dealing with, do you guys see this in grocery stores? The run on toilet paper, the run on hand sanitizer. Because people perceive, like they have this perception that they have this lack of control, it causes them to do very erratic things, right? And sometimes be violent, as I've watched. These behaviors aren't new to psychologists. Like, I could have told you this thing was going to, these kind of behaviors are going to happen before this ever occurred. In fact, I tried to talk to you guys about some of it weeks before we were officially shut down. And that is that perception that you have no lack of control. You can, if you hoard toilet paper, all of a sudden you feel like you have some sense of control, but you really don't. You have control over your toilet paper. Bravo. You have control over your food supply. You have control over your health. You have control over whether or not you get admitted to a hospital. There's still, those are actual lacks of control. But people will try to fill that void with satisfying perceptions of lack of control. How do we cope with threats? And this comes back to catastrophes in your textbook too. Is, how do we deal with those threats? Do we invoke, a lot of us do this, by the way, a lot of us invoke emotion-focused coping. So when there's a stressful situation, these people act really erratic with their emotions. They get flustered, they get angry, they get scared. They have this emotional, visceral reaction to stress and threats. And that can lead to, obviously, lots of stress. The better solution really is problem-focused coping, where, again, you get back to that secondary appraisal where you say, hold on, okay, I got a problem. I'm going to be in lockdown. I need food I can prepare. Let's go back to why people made a lot of run on the grocery stores early on. If you went to Food City 2 weeks ago, you know what I'm talking about. Like, my Food City locally had no meat in their meat section. Like, all their chicken was gone. Everything was sold out. Even now, like, I went last Wednesday, and I was just shopping for normal stuff, and I walked by the aisle with the rice and beans. None. No rice. No beans. I'm talking about dry beans. They were all gone. And I thought, okay, people are emotionally just acting erratic. They probably have more beans than they could cook in the next 3 months at their house. But problem-focused coping is different. It's saying things like this. Okay, I need a certain amount of resources to get me through a certain amount of time. I'm going to buy smart. I'm going to buy these resources. I'm going to plan. I'm going to manage. I've noticed a lot of people doing this, by the way. I saw where gardens are, more and more people are planting gardens right now. More and more people are choosing to raise chickens right now to create their own food supply chain. So they're saying, hey, I can, if things were to get really bad, what I can do is I can manage the situation by having these resources over a prolonged period of time. Problem-focused coping rather than hoarding and buying everything. Traumatic stresses are these extreme events that cause psychological intense pain, like catastrophes like we've been talking about. 9/11, I think even now, a lot of people are losing people. And that's causing a lot of pain and an intense psychological injury, especially since people are trying to make attribution as to why their loved one had to die as opposed to someone else, or what we could have done to offset that. And that's causing a lot of extreme stress right now on people. Frustration is a similar but different event. And your textbook talks about this over on page 428 if you're looking. Occurs when people are blocked or prevented from achieving desired goal. And I have a nice diagram. Well, I'm going to get to that. Let's talk about this for a second. So what happens is you have something you want to achieve some goal, and there's something blocking that goal. And so you and your personality impede it, right? So, okay, here we go. This is going to be real talk for a lot of people sitting in this chat this morning. You procrastinating writing your paper. Your goal was back in early March. Hey, I'm going to knock this paper out for Terry. It's going to be done. I have it done by March 5th, 6th. It's going to be done and over with. And March 5th, 6th came along and you're like, haven't even read the first paragraph. Your personality characteristics of being a procrastinator impeded the progress towards the goal. And it starts to be frustrating for you because the next week comes along, you still haven't made progress. Why is that? It's not some external reason. It's some personality trait that you're demonstrating, that you just kind of put stuff off to the last minute. But it also could be external frustrations. And this is why I extended the paper due date. You remember the paper due date was originally March 8th, I believe. And I had to push it way back. Why? Well, we lost days early in the semester for weather, for flooding. We lost days for sick time, for the regular flu. And then we had this whole shift online. And I thought, man, all these external events are impeding the students from reaching their goal. So I have to push the due date back to help them achieve the goal. But let's talk about some beyond it being internal or personal or being external. Let's talk about like how you deal with frustration. So this diagram, I think, in many ways, you can find yourself in one of these 6, or actually 4 areas. Do you actually? Let me do this. You can't read the last one. I was right in the first 6 areas. Sorry. So let's talk about just initial frustration. You have a goal. All of a sudden, something shows up to prevent you from achieving that goal. First square there on the upper left. So some of us do this, and I think this is a great way to attack external frustration. You just stay persistent. You grind, as we say in the gaming world. You keep grinding. You keep moving forward. You stay persistent even when you fail. Just keep moving forward. Keep chipping away at it a little bit at a time. Persistence. Some of us say, you know what? I'm just going to take a shortcut. I'm not going to grind at it. I'm going to think outside the box. I'm going to find an alternative path to the goal. And for example, a lot of us are doing this right now, right? A lot of you are circumventing the 8 of you watching right now. I've lost a couple, apparently. Bored you to death. 8 of you watching right now, you are taking a different path. You tried to log in with your Chromebook, you had trouble, so you got your smartphone out and you're watching, right? You chose a different pathway to still arrive at the same goal. What you don't want to do is the next square over, and that is aggression. Many people, when they have something impeding them, it's almost, and we'll talk about this a bit, but certainly modeling by in your formative years can be detrimental here, right, guys? Where you see your parents experience some type of barrier, external goal, and they demonstrate direct aggression as a result to get through that. And that's one of the worst ways to approach external barriers or frustrations. I mean, certainly you can see this in abusive relationships where someone doesn't demonstrate a behavior that the other partner feels is appropriate, and they feel like that's somehow creating frustration, and therefore they get aggressive, maybe even violent towards that person. Another kind of negative way to deal with frustration, and I've dealt with this in my life, is displaced aggression. So, I'll get myself in trouble here. If you guys ever find yourself in a relationship with a teacher in the future, especially a K through 12 teacher, it's a tough job. And it's especially junior high. Hypothetically, let's say I was married to someone who taught junior high math. Hypothetically, of course. All pure speculation here. And they dealt with students who were pubescent, emotionally erratic, immature, and you're trying to teach them a concept like algebra. That's fun, said no human ever, or at least not this human. That can be a really frustrating endeavor, career. And, I understand it at times. Sometimes, hypothetically speaking, of course, maybe, my spouse would come home and just like vent and just have a lot of displaced aggression because she can't take it out on the students. So maybe I can just be the person she kind of displaces it on. And as long as that's I'm a psychologist, so I deal with it really well. But some people might not deal with it so well. Probably not the best way, however, to deal with aggression is to displace it towards another person. A therapist, fine. A therapist, also that's a spouse, sort of fine. But a spouse that has no training or not a good idea. You'll stress them out. Then there's the last goal. So, and this is another, I put this right up there with like if displaced direct aggression is like 1A, the worst way to deal with frustration. Withdrawal and escape is 1B, also the worst way to deal with frustration. A lot of people will become actually depressed. They will escape or withdraw from the goal entirely, and they just never will pursue it. This goes back to, you guys remember Harlow's monkeys? Remember the monkeys were separate from the mothers, and the monkeys that never had a cloth mother, notice that when they were stressed, when they were shown like the scary animal, what did they do? They just kind of withdrew. They didn't go to anyone that would give them comfort. They just emotionally withdrew and escaped from the situation. Not a healthy way to deal with a stress, threat, or frustration. So we talked about these really displaced and aggression, but one thing we didn't talk about, scapegoating, and that is a dangerous. That's a very dangerous solution to dealing with stress and frustration, is to just blame someone. Scapegoating is easy. It's lazy thinking. It's lazy relationship building. It's, instead of dealing with the aggression or the frustration in one of these healthy ways, persisting, looking at a different route, what does a person do? It's easy. They just blame someone else. Guys, I deal with this. Just curious, the 9 of you watching, how do you think Terry gets scapegoated from semester to semester? I don't know, with the paper. Any ideas? How I'm scapegoated by students? Like a lot of you in the chat have read your feedback for your paper, and I hope that you're not doing this to me now. I hope that you're not reading the feedback and being like, Terry's failed me. He didn't like me. He had something against me. He failed me. That's completely unfair, right? I mean, I gave you guys a rubric. I tried to give you as detailed feedback about where you didn't perform in that rubric to the best of my ability. And so just blaming me because you didn't achieve the goal that I clearly set out and I set rubric standards for, I gave an example paper, we worked on it in class, I tried to give you all these alternative pathways to achieve the goal. And yet still some of you will scapegoat me and say, well, it's Terry's fault. I failed. Terry failed me. If you're thinking that way, not about this class, just about this class, but about classes in general, I'm going to really challenge you to change your thinking, or you're going to have a life full of frustration and a lot of displaced aggression, maybe even direct aggression. All right, so I talked about this. Some of this, escape, and then that leads us to kind of conflict, and we definitely have to talk about this. I only have a short amount of time left, but we definitely want to talk about this. How do you deal with conflict? Do you like it? Do you enjoy it? Before I talk about the approaches to conflict, I'm going to make an argument to all of you watching this right now. I think conflict is an absolutely awesome thing. Love it. Love it. When managed well. Conflict is great when managed well. But that managed well part is what we're about to break down. How do you manage conflict going on in your life? When there's stress that occurs between a person who must choose contradictory needs, motives, demands. How do you approach that? Let's look at it. One way. Avoidance approaches. So you feel like you're being forced to choose between two negatives or undesirable alternatives. And my dad was this person, actually. He was an avoidance conflict person. He, didn't want to go to the doctor because he thought that he might get bad news, which ironically led to his bad news, led to him having stage 4 colon cancer. Never was diagnosed in time. So choosing between two negative, I want to emphasize that, two negative alternatives. Not choosing may be impossible or undesirable. Certainly undesirable, right? I mean, like with my father, very much it was not desirable to go to the doctor because he didn't think men went to the doctor unless you were really hurt, because that wasn't a masculine thing to do. And it wasn't really pleasant or desirable to develop a disease. But he felt like both were negative alternatives. And so he didn't choose either one. He just kind of was indecisive, didn't make a decision. And I still believe this day that it cost him his life. So, if he had chosen a different approach to the conflict, like let's say, well, I'll get to it. I'll get that in a second. Approach avoidance conflict. Being attracted or drawn and repelled by the same goal or activity. Attraction keeps a person in the situation, but the negative aspects causes distress. So, I'm a little late here for a second. What about your paper? Can you guys see this approach avoidance conflict with the paper I assigned all of you? Where you're drawn to it because you want to get a good grade, but you're also kind of repelled by it because it's a stressful activity that you don't like to do. And so that creates conflict. You're like, I want to get a good grade, but man, this is really hard. This sucks. I don't want to do it. And that dichotomy creates conflict. Yeah, I want to talk about one I don't have in the slideshow that hold on a second. The approach. conflict is you would like to go to, you must choose between two desirable goals. Here's the thing. Let's go back to your paper for a second. Approach avoidance and approach. Let's contrast approach and approach avoidance to conflict. It's the way you frame your thinking, guys. It's the way you think about the goal that's going to determine what approach, what conflict is going to emerge. So let's go back to the paper. You can choose to think about the paper like this. It really sucks. It's hard, but I want a good grade, right? And that creates this frustration and conflict of I don't want to do it. Creates stress. Or alternatively, you can approach it this way. Approach. Choose between two desirable goals. Goal 1. I can earn a good grade on this paper, right? And then the other approach, this is really hard, and this is going to showcase my competence to a 4-year school that I can do something that most of their freshmen can't do. So it's two desirable goals. You're getting a good grade for me, but at the same time, you're making yourself so attractive to bigger 4-year schools because you're showing them you know how to read a empirical peer-reviewed journal article. That's a win-win. That's an approach to conflict that you're having. So try to think about the way you frame goals and how that creates conflict. For a lot of people, the proof is in the pudding. If early on you're framing those goals in an approach manner, you're not going to have as much conflict, and it's going to be better for you in the end. Anxiety. Anxiety is the success worry, right? That people have feelings of tension, uneasiness, but based on an unclear threat. That's different than fear, right? Anxiety is like future-oriented, unclear threat. Fear is different. Fear is like there's something present right now, specific, and I have fear of that. The way to kind of reduce anxiety that people usually take is first they will deny that what they're feeling anxiety about is real. Then they'll repress it, unconsciously forget it. Reaction formation, they will act out an opposing behavior to block the threat. So a lot of you guys do this with your parents, don't you? In adolescence, a lot of you, whether you want to admit it or not, have anxiety about living up to the expectations your parents have set for you. And one way to deal with that anxiety for a lot of people is reaction formation, where they will act in 180 degrees, the opposite behavior to deal with a threat. So your parents want you to be a medical doctor. You purposefully fail classes like biology, and you say that you hate science, and you do a lot of these things that are in opposition to the expectation that your parents established. Regression. That's where you kind of move backwards, in relationships, you'll see this a lot where husbands will do this. They'll get in conflict with their wife. They'll have a lot of anxiety about their marriage, and they will seek the ultimate unconditional comfort of another female that is the only female that will give that to them, that being their mom. So they'll often go back home and allow their mom to take care of them because they're feeling anxiety about their marriage. Projection, unconscious, seeing your imperfections in others. Man. My name is Terry. I have a problem with projection. If more parents would just acknowledge this. Think about the kind of conflict you guys have with your parents at times. And I think you'll see what I'm getting at here. A lot of times when I criticize my kids, if I really think deeply about why I was so critical of them, it was not it was me. It was not them. Because most of the time, like, I'm just thinking to basketball for a second. A lot of you are probably going to grab this clip, send it to my son maybe. That's okay if you do. I admit it. If I were overly critical of him on the basketball court, like, why weren't you aggressive? Why didn't you make this play? Why didn't you make that steal? You should have done this, you should have done that. What I'm really saying, if I think deeply about it, is I wasn't aggressive enough in high school when I played basketball, or I didn't do this well enough when I was his age, and I want to vicariously remedy that through him by projecting my imperfections onto his development. And parents, it's really hard not to do this. You kind of get caught up in it. But projection, when you worry about your kids, with him, I want him to be the best he can be. And so I worry about it. And what I do, I project my unconscious imperfections as a result to deal with that anxiety. A lot of us deal with this. Rationalization, you make up all kinds of false reasons for why you do things. So, you guys ever watched the show 90 Day Fiancé? Maybe you do. I've been watching this show on TLC, home, watching TV. And this particular woman on the show is I'm fairly certain right now, her name is Yolanda. She's being catfished by this Instagram account currently. She thinks this guy's in love with her. And I'm watching it the whole time. I'm like, no, that guy's not real. Like, he doesn't exist. This person doesn't exist. And she's in the state of, she's dealing with anxiety of worrying about the relationship by saying things like, the reason his Instagram account was changed to some Nigerian name is because his account was hacked. Or he was somehow, he got screwed over somehow, and that's why this is looking like it's not real. I'm like, no, Yolanda, no, your anxiety, you're dealing with your anxiety, you're just rationalizing it away. Lastly, compensation sublimation. A lot of us, we excel in other areas that deal with frustrations and anxiety. I'll give you guys a good example of this. When I was in high school, actually, when I was in junior high, heading to high school, my parents got a divorce. And you might remember I told you guys that my parents had some problems with substance abuse, alcoholism in the family. Caused a lot of problems, as you might expect. But that didn't happen like overnight. It was like an insidious onset, right? It wasn't like my dad had problems day one and everything fell apart day two. It was over a period of years. This happened, a couple years. And as I look back, and I've done this, I've actually gone back and pulled up my report cards, because back when they actually printed these old-fashioned report cards, and I look back to my 8th grade year, my 9th grade year, and my sophomore year of high school. And my grades actually got better, which is bizarre if you think about it, right? If a child's dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of times that's a red flag. It's perfect. If you guys ever desire to become a K-12 guidance counselor, a good one that's not just an ACT prep person, and they are like looking out for your health and well-being, one of the red flags they look for is if they see your grades like fall off a cliff. That's a red flag that something might be going on psychologically with you. And they might bring you in for counseling and ask you what's going on and how are you doing. But my grades went the opposite. They didn't fall. They went like that. Because of sublimation. Think about it. At school environments, no one was drinking. No one was being physically abusive. There's no substance abuse going on. An adult was being in control of a setting. The setting was calm, cool. There was nutrition, food there. There were rules. And in that setting, I excelled because it was the opposite of the anxiety-invoking home life that I had. And so some kids will sublimate or improve their performance as a result of this. So some reactions to anxiety are that way. Freud. I'm going to have to wrap it up here. and I'll let you definitely look over biofeedback. And this is a lot of these biofeedback and stages to reactions to stress you're going to see in the film, so that's pretty cool. But let's end on Freud today. Let's end here. So Freud, as you might remember, was the guy we talked about in chapter 1 who said that everything is about the unconscious mind, right? And he was one of the first people to kind of focus on this area of repression and denial, in terms of like how your unconscious mind deals with stress and anxiety by using something called defense mechanisms. In fact, what I just told you guys about, what I just talked about with sublimation, is a defense mechanism. It's a way that people deal with threatening situations in the short term to overcome stressors. So he said that the way a lot of us do this is we work through these defense mechanisms, and we'll talk about them now. Denial, as I mentioned before, you just kind of say, don't believe it's happening. You just denied the existence of the problem. You lie to yourself. You lie to people around you that there's no problem. There's no reason to be worried because this is not really happening. Like a lot of people have said early on in this COVID-19 pandemic that we're dealing with, right, guys? Is a lot of people were like, this isn't real. I'm going to spring break. I'm going to Mardi Gras. I'm going to party. And now we have rapid spread of the disease. Repression, that is unconsciously forgetting painful memories. We see this a lot with children, particularly children that are abused early on in their development. Some children will grow up, become adults, and have forgotten entirely that they were abused. They will go to a therapist. Largely, this happens in hypnotherapy situations. And they'll recover this memory. And they'll be horribly distraught as a result of recovering the memory. That is, it's like a self-preservation, right? Self-preservation mechanism where it's better for you psychologically to forget the thing that's causing the anxiety. Reaction formation, as I mentioned earlier, doing the opposite. Projection, as I mentioned earlier, me with my son. And then rationalization, as I was saying earlier, with the way people kind of give false reasons. All of these were, and I should have said this earlier, all of these come from Freud's ideas of the unconscious mind. All of these defense mechanisms, he would argue, are the way people deal with anxiety day in and day out. And I would want you to know all of these defense mechanisms for the upcoming test. And I would want you to know that they come from Freud's ideas. Way over time. All right, last thing. I'm going to shut it down here, I promise. We'll end the stream after this. Learned helplessness. Martin Seligman, he said, he's a cognitive guy, and he would say that what happens is people learn to act or avoid stimuli because they appear to be something they can't control. And they may feel like if they fail, that it's going to be long lasting. Let me rewind your brains to last week when we talked about motivation and emotion. We talked about, you might remember, locus of control. Carol Dweck. You guys remember that last week? Locus of control is whether it's internal or external, or whether it's stable or unstable, you might remember. That is, where do you find your center, locus, center of control? Is it with you? Do you make attributions? Let's go back to this paper thing for a second. If a student failed that paper, and some did, do they say, I failed the paper, they demonstrated internal, stable locus of control. I failed the paper because I didn't do the work. I failed the paper because I didn't follow the resources that Terry gave me. I failed the paper because I didn't look at the template. I didn't read the paper close enough. Or do they alternatively use an external locus of control where they go, I failed the paper because Terry hates me. I failed the paper because I suck. I failed the paper because I always fail. These external attributions, these external locuses of control result in what Martin Seligman would call an inability to overcome future obstacles because you learn over time that you suck. You start believing that you're never going to overcome challenges because you failed the past challenge. That is a slippery slope towards depression, actually. If you start believing that you're always going to fail, you make these external attributions that it's someone else's fault that you failed, don't be surprised that you experience learned helplessness and you eventually arrive at a state of depression where you are very despondent, withdrawn, sad, where you have a loss of appetite. You don't even want to get off the couch. You don't even want to get up and cook food. You just are lethargic. And we'll, trust me, guys, when you come back from spring break, I'm going to show you guys some therapy sessions of people with depression, and we're going to break them down. We're going to look for the symptoms that showcase major depression, showcase the depressive episodes, all these things. But just know that learned helplessness can lead to this idea. All right, I'm going to stop here. And let you kind of look over the rest of this as you look over the resources for this week. We're at 12:15. That's about an hour. We've been going about an hour. I'm going to have to trim this video so the people that come won't look at it at all. Thank you for the 10 of you that showed up, the 8 of you that stayed with me. I just want to leave you with a couple of reminders. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., I'll be doing a Kahoot stream to prepare you guys for your test. So show up for that. Be prepared to play some Kahoot. This week is a relatively light week except for your exam. You just have a discussion board, some reading, a video to watch. Pretty easy week to slide you into spring break. Know that for the Seymour students, I'm working on papers. I'll be grading them today and tomorrow. I hope to have yours finished by tomorrow. It's just taking me a lot longer with the rubric being broken. I think that's all the reminders I have for you guys. It's been fun. I hope you've enjoyed talking about stress, stressors, health response, health psychology, how to deal with conflict. Actually, what our little talk today should help you a lot in your discussion board post as well. So, all right. Any last minute questions for me, guys? Or are you like, Terry, please stop talking. We've had enough of you for an hour. Sipping coffee, thinking about it. Yeah, definitely, Austin. See you tomorrow. Bye, Salima. By the way, I don't think it's all that obvious why Levi, Tiffany, Salima, Austin, you guys, why you do so well. Hi, Amberlynn. Hi. Why you guys do so well on your tests and papers and stuff, because you show up to these things. And you work hard. I'm not discounting that. You do work hard. But thanks, guys. Y'all have a great day. See you tomorrow. Have a lot of fun playing Kahoot. Until then, we'll see ya. Bye.